بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما اللهم أرنا حقيقة الأشياء كما هي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, I'm probably the youngest on the stage right now, and I do not have a PowerPoint. I feel very old school. And there is a reason for that. If I had a whiteboard, I may have been a little bit more interactive. Nevertheless, the power of AI. I'll start with a little story. This is in the beginning of the 17th century. This gentleman was called Sir Thomas Roe. He was the ambassador of the British to the Mughal Empire. In the Indian subcontinent, the Mughal ruler at that time was Jahangir. He comes to his court and he notes in his diaries his interactions with the emperor and the people around. There's two things to take note of. Now, this is a Muslim king. Muslims rule India at that time. Muslims rule most of the world at that time. Thomas Roe, he says that the emperor was very interested. He was my drinking partner. So I used to drink with the emperor. And he was very fascinated by the alcohol that I brought with me. He loved it. He was really enthusiastic and excited about it. He asked me all of how it's made and all of that. And then what I found was when I would talk about machinery that was up and coming and developing in Europe, he showed no interest. Machinery was developing. It was going to reduce the need for manpower. The emperor and the Mughal emperor is like, I don't need to reduce the need for manpower. I have enough manpower. I have more manpower than any other place in the world. You keep your machinery, I have no need for it. What happens down the road, a couple of centuries really, that same ambassador, he becomes the information that he takes back. East India Company comes in, and East India Company eventually becomes the means through which India becomes British India. 30 million people killed because of British-induced famine in Indian subcontinent. Not just that, those who are left alive, they are now shipped off as slaves. Because if you want food, if you want to be alive, you got to work. Your own food has been shipped abroad. Because European food was bland, we got spices. That's pretty much all we had. The intellect which we gave to the world. Again, an Indian thinker, contemporary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, Allama Iqbal, one of the founding fathers of Pakistan, in his reading, he said that the inner core of Western civilization is Quranic. What did he mean by that? He spoke to the empirical attitude within the Quran. إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. That your hearing, your seeing, your hearing, your vision, your capacity for reflection or intuitive capacity for that matter, you will be held to account for that. That it is integral what distinguishes Quranic scripture from all other scripture and from all other understandings of religion, spirituality, was how empirically grounded the Quran was. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. That the Quran turns its readers, its believers, their attention to the material world. It tells them, look, and how does it allude to the material world? A unit of the Quranic revelation, in English it's translated as a verse, but we know it's an ayah, an ayat. These are ayat. These are signs, miraculous signs, sacred signs. The Quran identifies itself with this word ayat. The Quran identifies in the material world. The ayat in the world of physics, the ayat in the world of biology, the ayat in the world of psychology. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. That we will soon show them ayat in the horizon, in the world outside, and in the world inside. So this is the Quran prophesizing that these are ayat to come. These are the ayat that are going to be outside of the Quran, that the Quran is validating. That's the empirical attitude that the Quran inspires, that the humanity before this did not have. As far as human thought was concerned, as far as human civilization was concerned, Greek thought was anti-empirical. They looked at the material world, they looked at what the eyes could see and what the ears could hear, and they would consider that inferior knowledge. They did not consider that to be knowledge worth striving for, struggling for, or knowledge that could give you anything worthwhile. For them it was all rationality, according to the deductive logic or what have you. It was the Quran that inspired this empirical attitude. But what that empirical attitude, that Brother Irfan was alluding to as well, how that led for us to be pioneers in so many different fields, that was accompanied by that authentic interaction that Sister Majida was referring to. That our religion looked at civilization and saw a responsibility. Islam saw a responsibility, placed it upon the Muslims to be the custodians of civilization, as opposed to Christianity at that time, which saw that spiritual growth was only possible if you turned your back toward civilization. If you wanted spiritual felicity, if you wanted salvation, if you wanted to grow, then you had to become abstinent. Then you had to become monastic. The Quran was very clear. وَالرَّهْبَانِيَّةَ نِبْتَدَعُوهَا. This rahbaniyah, this is a bid'ah. This turning your back away from the world, from civilization, is an innovation. We did not ask them to do it. فَمَا رَعَوْهَا حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهَا. And even they could not practically sustain it. So those were the dominant ways of looking at the world, either the Christian way or the Greek way. And even the Greek way was, of course, in its demise. That too was revived by the Muslims, ironically. And it needed to be changed. And the Muslim empirical attitude born by the Quran led the way, but it was accompanied with that Muslim ethic, with that compassion, with that mercy. The compassion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam flowed through the ummah for centuries. And every technological advancement we would turn to, every development in knowledge we would turn to, the intent was genuinely the betterment of humanity. Somewhere along the way we lost track. Somewhere along the way we disconnected from that very Quranic message. And so we lost connection with that empirical attitude as well. That empirical attitude was taken from us. We do not have any claim to it anymore. And those who took it up, took it without the ethics. They took it without the love of Allah, without the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, without any reason for authentic interaction. And so when they developed that, and the technological boom that resulted, now we find ourselves behind the 8 ball. Now that technology is used, it has become a machinery for one genocide after another. What we're seeing in Gaza right now is an outcome of our own obliviousness, of our own heedlessness to our message, to the spirit of the Quran. What we fell for, as Allama Iqbal says, was the dazzling exterior of the Western civilization. That is not what it was meant to be, what to take inspiration from. the sexual liberation, the liberation of saying what you want, doing what you want, wearing what you want. That wasn't the inspiration. What happened to that empirical attitude? What happened to that pursuit of knowledge? But our pursuit of knowledge was supposed to be for a greater good. And when we turned our back from that, and what we thought what it means to be modern is to disconnect from tradition, disconnect from scripture, then we became followers. Then we let other people do the thinking for us, as Dr. Jones was speaking about. And we just have their frameworks, their languages, to articulate even our own messages. Whatever it is that we want to say. There's a colonial framework around which now we are forced to adapt. And so, with the development in artificial intelligence, we see the same cycle repeating. When it came to audio recordings, when it came to video recordings, we continue to complain that we do not have any entertainment, any good entertainment that inspires values to our children, and they're addicted to all kinds of Walt Disney and Bugs Bunny and what have you. And they're not learning the right stuff from The Simpsons. Well, that has a lot to do with how long it took for us to pick up our game, to realize what these tools, what they're good for and what they're going to result in. We kept our ethics to ourselves. We disconnected ourselves from the technological development, so those who did develop it, very unabashedly, whether it's Google or Meta or any technological corporate, or any corporate for that matter, why are they inherently Zionist? Why can you not use the word Zionist in negative terms on Facebook and Instagram anymore? Because they're evil or they're bad, be that as it may. How about we're lazy? How about we left our own legacy? The morality with which we were supposed to keep this unbridled hunger for power and exploitation in check. That morality is sitting on our bookshelves, barely finding its way in our character. And therefore we find ourselves complaining and lamenting and not being able to lead the world, so that what we develop, how we take AI, is genuinely in the legacy of Rahmatan lil Alameen, a mercy for all of humanity. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala an-nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima.